Welcome to your College-Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
Good morning, friends. I'm coming to you from Greenville, South Carolina. A lot has happened since we last met. First of all, we had an absolutely sensational SACAC conference. Over 850 people, the largest ever. And it was just amazing to have this meeting with admission professionals and college counselors of all stripes come from all over just for some professional development and networking and interaction and good food. And it was also great because 4 of our 7 co-hosts, Lynda, Lisa, Susan, and I got to hang out and spend a lot of time together. And something else that was a lot of fun, some of our other college counselors who are regular listeners, who are big supporters, shout out to Steve and Heidi, got to meet with the rest of our co-hosts for a meal. And, you know, it's a tradition that I'd like to continue. So we're committed to this conference. Next year, March 23rd, 24th, we'll be in Raleigh, North Carolina, as long as our health allows for that. And if you're a regular podcast supporter and you're also a college counselor and you're at that SACAC conference, we'd like to continue to have a gathering of our supporters. It was a lot of fun. So we'll share some more insights sort of throughout the podcast about different insights from the conference. But before we dive into today's episode, I just want to thank you guys so much. You know, it was last week when I came on and I said, I never really asked for reviews, but we have 192. It'd be great if we could get 8 this week. Well, do you know 25 came in just like that? Snap. I checked the next day after I made that announcement and we were already had 13 come in. And so you guys are just really awesome. Just by providing a description of your experience with the podcast, you help other listeners figure out if this is the content that they're looking for. So there's nothing more important than people's time. And so for those of you who invested your time and wrote a review, we are most grateful. If it's something that you haven't done, you still want to do, we welcome more reviews. And thank you, thank you, thank you. So for today, we're going to continue reflecting on themes that emerge, trends, observations from this recent class of 2023. Most of the things I'm going to share with you today are not going to be things that you haven't heard if you're a regular listener. But maybe in discussing them, you'll realize that, wow, this is even more of a force or more of a trend than we had even emphasized before. And so I'm just going to touch on them. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth. And I'm still reflecting on this year. So there may be other thoughts I have that I'll share in other weeks. But these are the things that pop in my mind as I look at the year. The first is how much some schools are really struggling out there. And it's not just the rural and the remote schools with no brand names and low endowments. It's a lot of schools. There's a lot of fear out there over, am I going to make my class? That's a term I don't know if I've used on here before, but I probably should have saved it for admissions vernacular. Making your class just means meeting your enrollment goals. There's a lot of fear. And some of that fear is from schools that you would never think. Schools with some pretty big brand names that are not sure if they're going to make their class. And so it's this confluence of all of these things all coming together at the same time. The enrollment cliff, which we've talked about, the growth of online education, more opportunities to do certificates and badges, reduced state educational funding, students just going to work because they can make a lot more money than they ever could before. You got someone that can, right out of high school, make $20 an hour, maybe more than their father's making, very appealing. Then you have something we haven't talked a lot about recently, which is, endowments took a real hit this year. So for schools that are using their endowment to fund a portion of their operating budget, that really impacts them. Of course, we have reduced state funding, and then just the overall attack on college. Is college worth it? Is college just liberal indoctrination, versus something that's great and something we should pursue versus something that's going to brainwash you? Like, that mindset is just so much more prevalent than ever before. And then the high cost of college. So all of these things are just putting enormous pressure on schools. And for all we talk about how hard the hardest schools are to get into, just this chasm that has emerged between really, let's say, like the top 3 to 5% of schools and then really the rest of them. It's not quite that simple because there is still that middle group, but there's just large numbers of schools that are really struggling with literally paying their bills and staying afloat. I can't emphasize it enough. Another trend is high turnover in the admission profession. The combination of long hours, low pay, unrealistic expectations, and then other opportunities that people have to do other things. It's really putting pressure on admission offices to how can we get through all these files with constant turnover. And Julie and I have something coming up on that. We're going to go a little bit more in depth on that. So stay tuned for that. And that's coming up pretty shortly on our Thursday episodes. Something we've talked about a lot. I don't want to harp on it too much, which is how strong the applicant pool is at the high end. The one thing I just want to say about that is this is now the third year we've seen just ridiculous selectivity in those 75 schools I talked about 2 weeks ago, and some of the 35s that I mentioned last week as well. And the thing I want to say here is this is now not a new phenomenon. This is now the new normal. When you have it 3 straight years and no indication it's going to change next year, this looks like the new normal. Another trend is something I've talked about, but I don't think I've talked about it anywhere near enough, is the increased use of predictive modeling, predictive analytics, data analytics. Schools are in an enormous pressure to figure out which of these applicants are actually going to come. Who's going to pick our school? And the sophistication of the data that we're in the world that we're in right now and how it's being used is just truly extraordinary. Lynda and I were having a conversation with EAB, who's one of the biggest players in this field. And, when we go to these conferences, they set up their booths, a lot of the vendors, to stop by and talk about their different services. And some of the fun is just interacting with these educational tech companies and other companies. So I was talking with EAB and I asked them about their data analytics product and what's going on with that. So they start telling me all the new bells and whistles and they're rolling out a new product. And then I said, I asked a really kind of a dumb question. I kind of knew the answer, but I asked it anyway. I said, is there a lot of interest in this product with colleges? And you should have just seen the facial expression on the lady. It was like, duh, you darn right there is, with enthusiasm. And it's at a Slate API. And so it's just, I went to 2 or 3 sessions on this topic. I was very interested in this when I picked my workshops. Predictive modeling, data analytics, how it's being used, how granular it is. It's like incredible. I attended a presentation and one school said that they are able to predict within 1% certain applicants if they're going to come or not. It's just stunning. So big data. Another trend is students are starting the college process earlier. Now, one session I went to said that 61% of people are now starting in the 10th grade. And I wish I could share with you who did that survey, but it was a large number. It was like 1,800. 61% starting in the 10th grade. We're experiencing this in our private college counseling. I had more people reach out in the 9th grade this year than the 5 years before. So that, we probably need to come back and talk about that. Is that good? Is that bad? It's beyond the scope of this conversation. I'll just say simply, it can be good or it can be bad. I think to be completely college obsessed in 9th grade is over the top. To do some general light planning makes sense. And I'll just leave it at that for now. But that's definitely a trend. Another one is more students are starting to go out of state now. So what happened with the pandemic is people are staying closer to home. As the pandemic wanes, you're seeing more distance and traveling, people being willing to go across the country or go 500 miles away, more so than the last couple of years. And just where are the men? Where are the boys? Like this is really hurting the boys. All the stuff that I talked about before and who's going to college, like the gap between men and women in the college going population, just another trend that just is only being accelerated in the last couple of years. So those are the main things that I noticed this year. And I haven't decided whether or not next week I'll have more reflections on 2023. I'm inclined to come with a different topic that I've been noodling on about college tours. It's been a real interesting ride for me. My plan was after 5 days in Jacksonville, go to Columbia, South Carolina. Well, first go to College of Charleston, visit there. Then go over to University of South Carolina, visit there, go to Clemson, visit there, go to Furman. And I've gone to all those places, but I've been sick. So I've been mostly in the hotel and driving around campuses and had to cancel my tours and cancel meetings I had with students. But, I'm just glad it didn't hit me at the SACAC conference or it didn't hit me on all the fly-in. So.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Anyway, that's my recap for today. Very excited to talk to you about a brand new interview. And it's with my two incredible colleagues, Lynda and Lisa. And first of all, shout out to Diana from Wisconsin, who sent in a question some time ago and said, I've heard every single one of your podcasts, and I'd love to see more emphasis on the transition between high school to college. And so we said, well, you know what? Lynda has a daughter going through this. Why don't we let her document everything that she did and they did from May 1st, really all the way through Thanksgiving and the end of that first semester. And Lisa's oldest daughter didn't go through that long ago either, so she recalls it. So the two of them just have a conversation. And I will share this with you. They actually recorded this way back around December when everything was fresh. That's when they actually recorded everything. But we're just running it now because now's the time when you can relate to it, right? If we played it back in December, it wouldn't have made any sense. But now's the time we're airing it. So even that it was recorded 6 months ago. And I just want to say something. I work with two incredible people. Like, you don't realize all the things that they do behind the scenes to make this podcast go, to make this podcast thrive. They're really exceptional. What Lynda's doing with the blog, what Lynda's doing with the newsletter, and what Lisa's doing with all of these interviews. Over the next 2 or 3 months, Lisa's going to do more interviews than me. And she has some incredible interviews that she's already done, and I've heard them. And it's just helped me so much to be able to share the responsibility. And so it's pretty awesome for Lynda and Lisa to have a conversation with you about transitioning to college. So listen and enjoy.
Hi, this is Lisa, and I am one of the co-hosts of the College Bound Kid podcast. And I am very excited to be here today with one of my favorite people, Lynda Doepker. Lynda is on our School Match for You team, and she's been helping out with the podcast on your College Bound Kid. And today, Lynda and I are going to talk about something which I think is really important, which is the transition from high school to college in terms of how it goes for the family, what you need to know. What is surprising, and Lynda's going to talk about her own experience with her daughter, and is going to give us some ideas of things to look out for and things to do and things maybe not to do. So, Lynda, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your family, your daughter, and where she's at school?
Yeah. Well, Lisa, thanks for having me on the podcast to talk at length about this. Well, yes, we'll be at length, probably. I have my daughter Samantha is at University of Chicago, and this is her first year. So she graduated in 22 and is starting this year as a freshman. And Samantha, she's an only child, so I didn't have one to practice on before. So a lot of it was we didn't know the right way to do things, so we made some mistakes along the way. But yeah, excited to talk about really what happens from the time you get that acceptance through that, sending them off to school and having them come home for break.
Right. Because it's really shocking, I think, when they come home for break, having just endured Thanksgiving break and now staring in the face of Christmas break myself. The whole family is organized one way when my daughter is at school, and then she comes and we have to get reorganized the other way, and then she goes back, and then so there's just a lot of transitions on both sides. But so Samantha gets her acceptance to the University of Chicago. And it's a very exciting moment. And that's sort of where the movie usually ends, right?
Right.
Like, yay, everything went great. What happened after that? Like, how did the rest of her senior year go?
So it was a very exciting time. And some of that was some of the just logistical things. Then you really start thinking about, okay, now we know where she's going to go, and we can start making plans, but you still have senior year to get through. And so the battle for senioritis really went full blown at that point, because in some ways they're already thinking about, what's it going to be like when I'm finally out of the house and I get to do what I want. I'm putting that in air quotes. And, but they still have to get through midterms and finals and AP tests and all of those last things. I know we were so, and I say we as a family because it felt like a family affair, the whole college application process. And some things kind of fell by the wayside, like senior pictures. We were very late to the party on that. So I guess it was a lot of a relief to be done with it. And she got her acceptance in February. So then it was making sure we didn't miss out on all of the lasts. And I know parents are I don't have to say that, because I think it hits the parents so hard that last semester of senior year. The last time, for prom and the parties and the last sporting events and all of that. So we really try to focus on that in addition to getting ready for school. And some of the things that, we thought about, and I have a support system of parents who have been there, done that, and listening to them. And it was like, make sure they know how to go grocery shopping on their own. Do they know how to actually use a credit card? Do they understand the difference between a credit card and a debit card? And just, can they make a phone call if they have to? And so just kind of checking off those lists do you really know how to do this? Do you know how to do laundry? Do you know how to tell when a sweater says dry clean only that
They
there's a
ain't kidding
reason
around.
for that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do not throw the wool sweater into the washing machine.
Mm-hmm.
So it was some of those kinds of things that you realize you're not going to be around to save them. But then also it was planning the summer. And I know right now is when a lot of families are thinking about, what their students should be doing for the summer. And Samantha she was looking at some of the pre-college programs, and she had applied to one, and she wound up getting waitlisted. So we had kind of put family plans on hold, seeing what was going to happen. So she wound up working, which was, good for us because we got to keep her home for longer. And the pre-college program she did wind up going on was just a week long. So it was much shorter than what we had originally thought. So making plans about what to do in the summer was a big thing. And some of those logistical things, like we got the wisdom teeth appointment scheduled because I'd heard from friends like, the worst thing in the world is to deal with, probably not the worst thing in the world, but a not fun thing to deal with freshman year is recovering from wisdom teeth surgery in a dorm room. So we did that, and all the doctor's appointments and the making sure all of that, and you have to plan that ahead of time. So it was a lot of planning kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of it. So one thing is like try to enjoy the rest of senior year, and really, not just be thinking about the future, but focus on, what is obviously a special time. For me, our senior year ended on March 16th of 2020, and that was the last of any of it. And it was very sudden. So I anticipated it was going to be hard to go to the last musical and the last play. And I never got to even do those things. So, but I can imagine, that would have been really, moving and sad, to do. And so you want to be present for that, but you also want to make sure that your kid knows how to do stuff on their own. And that's, kids are at various different levels of maturity of that. But like, for instance, when I went to the University of Chicago from rural Missouri, I did not know how to cross the street. I did not understand the whole thing about, the whole thing was just flummoxing to me. And so a guy from New York, spent an afternoon walking around Hyde Park with me, showing me when to go, when not to go, when I need to listen to the walkie guy, when I don't. And it was a really kind thing that this, fellow student did, but I did not know how to do that. So I did not know I would need to know how to do that. I don't know why that didn't occur to me, but anyway, so just things like that. And then get all your medical stuff done, get those wisdom teeth out, get any, if you have to get any other things done, get them done. So you can send them off to school with all that done. You don't have to worry about it anymore.
Checklist is really amazing, and I'm chuckling about the crossing the street because a few years ago we had gone to New York, and I remember having that conversation with her. Like, no, big city, being a pedestrian in a big city is different than taking a stroll, down our little town. So it's those kinds of things that can be a shock to the system. And of course, trying to convince your daughter that Chicago winters really are different. And
yeah, I didn't think it would be that bad, but boy, was I wrong. It's very different. I got to tell you, it's not the same.
It's not the same. And I grew up in Michigan. So, I kind of, I know what those Great Lakes do, in the winter. And yes, I had to send up a hat, LL Bean. I think I am a preferred customer now, from buying an even heavier winter coat. We need another pair of gloves. So just kind of thinking about those logistic things. And then, parents, especially moms of daughters, beware of those Instagram and Facebook groups where they look at the dorms, where they hire decorators for dorm rooms. And that is, luckily, University of Chicago doesn't seem to be too...
yeah, I never found them super big on the decorating aspect.
Yeah. Thank goodness, because that gave my heart pause, seeing some of those absolutely beautiful.
Oh no, they're better than my house. Please,
they are way better than my house. They're
Yeah.
way better than my house. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot.
So
I mean, there's
just
just a
thinking about
lot.
that.
Now, let me ask you this. Like I've heard a lot of people tell you that time after the college acceptance to when they leave can be a conflictual time. Like kids seem to be, I guess the way one person I know put it is like God made your adolescent obnoxious during their senior year of high school so that you are fine with them going off to college and separating. Like there's something about irritating and getting on each other's nerves. Did that happen for you?
Not really. And Samantha is just such a good kid. And it's just, I think part of it is it's just, an only child.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that has something to do with it. So we didn't really have a lot of conflict, but she was ready to go. I mean, she was definitely ready to go. And she didn't get her driver's license until the very end of her senior year. So when she finally, had the freedom to get out of the house whenever she wanted to, she kind of got that taste of freedom and she liked it. And, and so she was definitely ready to get out of the house, but we really didn't have a lot of the conflict that I hear about in other families. And I am grateful for that.
Right. Well, and I think, unfortunately, your experience might be atypical. So, parents, if you're out there fighting with your senior, you're very good company. You're not alone, unfortunately. Yeah. So it sounds like, everything went pretty smoothly. How did it go in terms of like all the administrative stuff and getting everything ready for the school? Was it easy? Was it confusing at times?
It is confusing. And I think one of the things that was hard was, during the admissions process, we really, it was kind of a group effort. And I know there are families out there who say, it's their life, they have to learn how to do it. But it's a lot. It's a lot when you look at what those kids have to manage in their senior year, especially if they're applying to competitive schools,
right?
Dealing with keeping their grades up and what is probably a rigorous course load, all of those essays, making big decisions. And so we try to help. But once that acceptance comes in, she is the customer of the college. And so all of that information would come to her, and she did not choose to give us access to her, brand new UChicago email address and all of that. So everything was being filtered through her. And there's important things that were happening. She had to take placement tests. And she had to decide whether or not she wanted to take placement tests. And so all of that filtered through her. So a lot of it became anything we need to be aware of. Do you have your date scheduled and all of that? And just kind of letting some of that go and realizing that, now she has to manage this. And in a matter of months, she'll be away at school and she's going to have to figure it out on her own.
Right. Yeah. And then how did your family deal with like FERPA and HIPAA and all of those acronyms that we have to struggle with when our kid goes to school.
Right. So Samantha is still just 17 when she went to school. And so we haven't had to do any of that yet. But that will be coming up in a few months. And it's on our radar, and know that all of that has to be done. So I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work. But for instance, we thought she might have to see a dentist. It makes it sound like she's got a lot of dental issues, but
no,
really
it's just
doesn't.
normal stuff.
So, but finding a dentist ahead of time in Hyde Park and getting all of that information ahead of time filled out. So if she really did need to see somebody, it would be seamless, and there's not this back and forth. So I do encourage families to think about that. Is there a doctor within your insurance network up there that you can see, or are you using the school's insurance? And that was, I think UChicago right now is $4,000 for the year if you use their insurance. And that's something you have to opt out of.
Right.
And I think that's how it is at most schools. You have to opt out. And if you don't know that you have to opt out, you're going to have to deal with that.
Yeah, no, that's important. They don't always make that clear to parents that okay, if you have your own insurance and your kid is covered, you don't have to pay for that. It's sort of something that you kind of, I think, have to find out obliquely, to know. And just for people who don't know what FERPA is basically when your kid's 18, they go to school, and if they don't waive their FERPA rights, you can't find out anything about them as a parent. So let's say your kid, like they haven't been going to class and maybe they're failing or something like that. Or you're concerned about them from a health perspective, and you call up the school and they're like, yeah, we can't talk to you. We have to talk to the kid, which becomes a problem if the kid is maybe in a state where they're not able to really fully deal with those things. So Mark and I always encourage parents to strongly insist that their kids waive their FERPA rights. And that obviously you don't want to be going inside their, class management software every day, seeing if they did their homework, but it is just a fail safe in case something happens. And the other thing is HIPAA, and HIPAA, of course, is medical confidentiality. So once your kid turns 18, and then the doctor is not going to tell you anything, you can't make appointments for them unless they waive their HIPAA rights. So it's important, like with the school, I think, we have like a limited waiver of HIPAA rights. So like I could call up the school, make an appointment for her at the health clinic or something, but I'm not going to be looking in her record. And then the other thing I would say that you probably want to do when Samantha turns 18 is to get a power of attorney written up. So that is so like your kid's out of state and, let's say they're in a car accident and you technically don't have any rights to make medical decisions for that child, even though they're incapacitated at that point, unless you have a power of attorney that you've drawn up. And so we had to get ours drawn up, and then, we had it notarized and we had to have witnesses. But at least we know that, like, if something were to happen to Lily and she could not make medical decisions for herself, that we would be able to step in and help with that.
And Lisa, it's so important that families do this, because you definitely don't want to be having those difficulties when something happens. God forbid, there's a broken leg or a car accident where they didn't learn how to cross the street appropriately.
Which could have very well happened to me. My parents did not have a medical power of attorney at that point. I tell you that.
It can be a real issue. So yes, and those are the kinds of things, we get so wrapped up in the excitement of going to college and the football games and the decorating of dorm rooms and the new wardrobe,
right.
That it's easy to forget, those details that seem mundane, but can make a big difference. God forbid you should need to deal with it.
Well, and your kid doesn't really change from the day they're 17 and 364 days old, right? to their 18th birthday. They don't like all of a sudden become like way more mature that day, but that's the law has a pronounced change in how it views them. And so I think that can kind of take parents by surprise. But I've heard on more than one occasion that like a kid goes to school, maybe gets depressed, isn't going to classes, maybe is suicidal. The parents don't find out anything about that until maybe things have gotten to a point where maybe the kid has attempted suicide or, they get a call from the psychiatrist and that is just not a position that I would like to be in. So that's why I think it's really important to be able to talk to the school, talk about their academic progress, at least in general terms, and, maybe get medical information from the school if that is necessary.
Right. And that, and the mental health aspect of school is, that is a conversation that we did have that summer. It's a little daunting sending your kid off to the place where fun goes to die. The school has such a reputation. So we talked about it. What's the worst thing that could happen when you go off to school? If you don't do well, if you hate it, if you can't do the work or something like that, transferring to a different school, coming home, taking a year off, these are not the worst things that have happened to people.
Yeah.
There are options. And when we went for accepted student days and really getting a handle on what resources are available, and I think more and more schools recognize that's an issue and are trying to be preemptive, but they are overwhelmed, on most college campuses. It's just a growing problem.
Yeah, which I guess is another thing. Like if and you alluded to this with the dentist, but if your kid has any, mental health issues that you feel like are going to need to be addressed, or medical issues or dental issues, orthodontic issues, then spend the time before they go trying to get them, like established as patients at whatever practices you find, because I can tell you in the mental health field, that could take 6 months to get off a waiting list. And I mean, with dentists too, quite frankly. So, at any kind of doctor, they seem to all be very overwhelmed. So that's just something to try to plan as well.
Friends, this completes the first half. We hope you'll join us next week for the final part.
On Thursday's episode, Susan is my co-pilot, and we're finishing off a trilogy we're doing on the future of fair admissions. And in this series by James Murphy, the senior policy analyst of educational reform. And we looked at a number of topics in the past, including early decision and legacy preferences. And this one kind of pulls everything together and looks at transparency. We'll have another question from a listener that was sent in that Lisa and I will tackle. And our interview will be part 2 of 3 with Dr. Christine Gangelhoff, looking at advice for music majors from a music specialist. And we'll continue our college spotlight as Lynda will do the final part on Loyola University, Chicago. And friends, it's decision time. And it's a tough time right now, as some people have already made their decisions. Some of them made them way back when you did ED. Others made them in February, March, April. But just remember, you're the one going. So there's going to be a lot of voices in your head. But Uncle Joe's not going. Aunt Susie's not going. Your best friend Beth is not going. Your brother Tommy's not going. Your parents aren't going. So you're the one who has to live with the decision. So make the decision that's best for you and trust your instincts. See you on Thursday, friends.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Lynda Doepker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Lynda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.